want to call the June 4th, 2025 meeting of the Charter Revision Commission to order. The first order of business is to approve the minutes, and we just received the minutes of the May 22nd, 2025 meeting, and I don't know if everyone's had a chance to look them over, and are we ready to approve them? Joy has read them.
Yeah.
As our secretary or our clerk. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I will move to accept the minutes.
Joy has moved to accept the minutes.
I'll second.
Anyone have any comments, questions? All those in favor of accepting the minutes of the May 22nd, 2025 meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, 6-0. Is there anything we want to modify on the agenda? I don't see have anything. Is there anything anybody wants to add, subtract? See, oh,
Not to add or anything, just
Yeah.
a technicality, we'll get to it when we go through the suggestions, but the recommendations regarding provisions affecting the select board and provisions affecting town manager
Yeah.
aren't just embedded in those two articles. So just to flag that there's some places outside of the select board
Yeah.
section and the town manager section where we also have recommendations.
yeah, and I think I put those there as the Article 4 and Article 5 notation so people will know what we're talking about.
Totally, yeah, I just want to make sure that there's an understanding that it's everywhere in the document that speaks to those offices.
Okay, so we'll go to old business and we'll start for everybody who's in the room, the giant cliffhanger where we ended last week. And as a recap, we were talking about if we make a recommendation to move away from representative town meeting, how would we do that? Like, what's the legal mechanism for us to do that? And we were told by the town attorney that we'd have to have, per state statute, a town-wide vote and it doesn't have to be in this exact language, but I'm gonna say it this way, to rescind the representative form of town meeting, or whatever it is, in the town of Brattleboro. Where we got stuck after we all heard that was, well, what does that mean for, if we have a vote in November or September or whenever we have it, what does that mean for representative town meeting in 2026? And what does that mean for approving the rest of the charter? So Hannah and I went back, we had another conversation with Bob Fisher. We have a memo in our packet that explains what will happen, but I thought Hannah can give us an explanation of what would happen. And there's a couple things that are involved in this. It's the legally what's gonna have to happen, and again, how it impacts RTM in 2026, how the process would be for us to do this, both rescinding, if that's what we wanna do, and the charter changes, and the timeline of this thing. So I think we should start with Hannah explaining sort of where we left off, which is what happens, how does this happen, and what happens to town meeting?
Right, so there are these sort of two separate matters. There's the matter of discontinuing the representative form of town meeting, and there is the matter of adopting the charter changes. So they go hand in hand, but we obviously need to discontinue before we can make the changes if our recommendation is to do away with RTM. So under state statute, we have to have a vote to discontinue the representative form of the annual meeting. And there is actually part of the act that created RTM, which is Appendix C. It's one of the appendices in our charter. A. And that act specifically states that RTM cannot.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have audio?
There should be. Oh no, sorry.
So maybe I should just restart this for the purposes of the people online.
So we're just explaining the legal process that we need to go through if we decide to discontinue RTM and recommend another form of town meeting. And so under state statute, we have to have a vote to discontinue the representative form of town meeting. And under the act that created RTM, which is Appendix A in the charter, the act, states that those provisions cannot abridge the right of the town to assemble and hold general meetings or give RTM the power to commit the town to any measure affecting its existence. So basically, RTM can't be the be-all, end-all on whether or not RTM stays in effect. And so we would have to have a vote on that,
That would be a townwide vote.
a townwide vote.
Can I ask a question? It says, accordingly, if the Charter Revision Commission decides to recommend switching to an open town meeting, by law, a vote must be held at a special or annual meeting to discontinue the current form of representative town meeting. And any measure regarding the existence of RTM must be voted on townwide ballot. What's the and? Do we have to have 2 meetings?
No, it's just to clarify that even though the statute says that the vote happens at an annual or special meeting warned for the purpose of having that vote can't be a special RTM. It has to be an open
But
town, a townwide vote.
But it says must be held and must be voted on by a townwide ballot. What? I don't understand the and.
Just to clarify that it needs to be a townwide vote at a special meeting. It can't be a representative town meeting.
Okay, I understand that part. But it says special or annual meeting and any measure regarding the existence of RTM must be voted on by townwide ballot. I just don't understand why the and is there. It makes it sound as if we have to do both things.
Both things are required by law, but they effectively create one vote. It just has to be a townwide vote. Because it can't be a vote of RTM to
I don't
discontinue
know.
RTM.
Maybe Bob,
I'm sorry, I just don't understand why there's an and instead of an or.
It's because it's not an or, it's both.
wait,
think I
can we
can
just hold,
explain it.
can we just hold on one sec?
Can you just tell us the section you're citing from, please?
Oh.
It's in Bob
paragraph 3
Fisher's
of the
memo, paragraph 3. There are copies of.
Oh, there. Oh, yeah, great. Yep.
And a quick note to anyone who recently arrived, please sign in on the clipboard.
The upshot, maybe I don't know, the upshot is, according to Bob, we have to have a townwide vote to get rid of RTM. One townwide vote has to be for RTM. And maybe this wasn't artfully written or,
There's these two different provisions that act in connection with each other, so it's both.
But a special or annual meeting is different from a townwide vote.
No, that's what this
No.
section 10 of Act 302 says, is that nothing about creating RTM prohibits us from having a townwide vote. And specifically, you have to have a townwide vote to get rid of RTM or to change change the existence of RTM.
I don't know if this is the cause of the confusion or not, but it's often overlooked when the select board adopts the warnings each year for town meeting. The warning that calls for the ballot for the election on town meeting day also is a town meeting warning, along with the warning that has all the
Yeah.
articles that'll get
Yeah.
discussed at the in-person town meeting. So what this is saying to us is, there's gonna have to be a warning for a town meeting that will be like the ones where we vote a ballot on town meeting day,
Not
To
a
vote
warning
for
for
this purpose.
an RTM.
not an in-person meeting.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
it doesn't make sense to me, the way it's written, but, okay.
Okay. So Hannah, we have to have a townwide vote to rescind representative town meeting.
Yes.
Yes.
And then we have to have a vote to adopt our charter amendments. And according to Bob, these can be done at the same time on a ballot. There's a sample, we are not committed to that. This is just to sort of give us a sense of what it might look like. And Kate and I also spoke with Hillary, and there's a part here where it says the proposed charter would follow, and there is actually a state law that says we can have copies of all the amendments available and just have it be a yes, no vote on all of it, and we don't have to print the entire thing on the ballot. You have to have them available at every ballot, or at every, what's it called, polling station.
Yeah.
It's for people to review. It'll be on record with the town clerk ahead of time. People can request paper copies. We'll have it online, but the whole charter is not going to be printed on the ballot.
Now, do we want to step back? Like Article 1 would say, this is draft language, so nobody quote me that it's going to say this.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt? Also,
Okay.
just because some people in the room know this from being with us these last few weeks and some don't, I think it'd be helpful for the public to know, all of this sounds like we've decided
Right.
that we want to have a vote to move away from representative town meeting. We have not decided that. What happened last week was, when we were on the verge of having a vote about whether or not to do that, we learned that there was this potential complexity that we're now discussing tonight. So we sought an opinion from the town attorney so that we could have this discussion before we move forward to try to decide about open town meeting or representative town meeting or strike ballot.
It's the continuation of the giant cliffhanger from last week. So there are two articles. The first one would say something like, shall Brattleboro discontinue the representative form of annual town meeting?
Right.
And that's what we have to do per state statute, if we're gonna recommend not going forward with RTM. Then the second article on the same ballot would say, in the event that the vote on Article 1 is in the affirmative, which means, yes, the town has said we wanna move on, shall Brattleboro adopt the following charter amendments?
Right, or adopt the charter amendments as whatever, again, it's just draft language, but just giving us a sense of what this ballot might look like.
And now the question was too, Hannah, the number one, if number one, the Article 1, which says, shall we discontinue RTM, if that passes, the timing of that is that means immediately we've rescinded representative town meeting. So what does that mean for representative town meeting in March of 2026?
If the vote is to discontinue the representative form of meeting, regardless of what the vote is on Article 2, we would default to the open town meeting under statute, which is cited here, 17 VSA 2640, and that sets out all of the everything that would happen there. And a lot of towns hold their open town meeting without a charter pursuant to the statute. So regardless of what happens with Article 2, if the town votes yes on Article 1, no more RTM immediately. It doesn't need to get ratified by the legislature or the governor. It's our decision as a town. Then, Article 2, the vote on Article 2 only counts if the vote on Article 1 is yes. So if the vote on Article 1 is no, RTM stays, the charter as it exists now stays. We can come back to what would happen in that situation at the end, but I'll just sort of go through because we're trying to talk about what happens if this goes through. So the vote on Article 2 is, or on the vote on Article 1 is yes, and the vote on Article 2 is yes. Then RTM goes away immediately. The charter changes are approved by the town and then sent to the legislature for ratification and approval in the 2026 session starting in January. So we haven't gotten to Kate's memo, but we're kind of assuming that this would be a vote late this fall or early winter. If Article 1 is a yes and Article 2 is a no, the charter as it exists continues. We don't have RTM, so the RTM provisions effectively act like the school board provisions in that they're in there, but they're moot because we don't have a representative form of meeting, and we would again default to the open meeting law under state statute, and we would have to come back with a different set of charter amendments to be approved at a later date. So in the event that the vote on Article 1 is no, or in the event that the vote on Article 1 is yes and Article 2 is no, no charter changes have been approved. So we would have to come back with a new set of charter changes, but that doesn't mean that the current charter doesn't stay in effect. So it's not as though we are repealing the charter or anything like that. It's just that nothing has changed. And so then the thought would be, if the vote on Article 1 is no, to come back with all of the other changes we're proposing, probably at the regular vote in March in the spring. And there's a couple ways we could do that, as we all know in the charter. And then if the vote on Article 1 is yes and the vote on Article 2 is no, then we lose one of these options because we can't make a recommendation to representative town meeting because it no longer exists. So we would have to go under one of the other provisions, which is how we're proposing to do the first vote.
And there would also have to be some delay in that case, where the other could move forward more quickly, but
Right.
we'd have to do some additional work on what even to recommend if the first set of recommendations gets rejected.
Right, correct. So then there's a helpful flow chart on the back.
It is helpful, thank you.
So that's how it would work. At no point are we operating with no guardrails. At no point is there not going to be some way to hold a town meeting in March if we decide to put this to the vote and the vote is yes.
Does anybody up here have any questions? Does this make sense, Maya?
Well, I've been reading this memo since I got it over and over, and I find asking people to vote on two things at the same time to be very, I don't want to say the word complicated, but confusing. And
Now, do you mean on the same ballot? or-
yes,
Okay, because the only other way to do that would have to be two elections.
yes,
And we would have to warn them as two separate
two
elections.
separate elections.
And I feel like a lot of the feedback we've gotten are that people want to know what would happen if we repealed RTM, and that's why I would think that we should put these out at the same time.
And it's not to say that there won't be the information sessions.
Oh, yeah, we haven't even got to
Well,
that.
yeah, no, I understand that. It's just that I think this if-then proposition and having people vote on it at the same time would be a little bit confusing, that's all. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it necessarily, I just think that it would be, yeah, we're gonna do informational sessions, but how many people come to those? And
I'm assuming,
And-
just one sec, I just want to hold on one sec.
how many people come to those? You know, how many people will pay attention? How many
Yeah.
people will go to the poll in November and not have understood what exactly they're voting on and what the ramifications would be? As I said, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm just saying, I think it's not as easy as it seems when we look at the flow chart. That's,
Hannah, did you want to say something?
Not if someone else does that. I feel like I'm talking a lot, but
I just want to make sure we're all clear. Like, are,
I
no, I
yeah.
understand what's happening.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
what would happen here?
Yeah.
I'm just saying that trying to get a townwide vote on something that has two provisions that are if, then, and different outcomes depending upon how people vote on each provision.
None of this
No.
goes on the ballot. It's just those two votes. This is just for our
I
information.
understand that, but this is, you would have to, you would have to explain to people what happens if Article 1 passes and Article 2 fails. What happens if Article 1 fails and Article 2
It's a
passes?
fabulous flow chart, just include that. Anybody worth a salt can follow that. Aaron Smith, District 7.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really appreciate this. Last week, own first person singular, I had a moment of strong reaction to the possibility that when we learned that there would have to be a vote explicitly on discontinuing RTM if that's where we do what we do end up proposing, that raised what it seemed the possibility that we might be in a void. We might not have the ability to hold a town meeting because we've rejected RTM, but we don't have something new yet. And where does that leave us? I really appreciate the clarity of there would never be a void if we did choose to travel this path. Then it's statutory open town meeting until such time as a different proposal is approved by the voters. So that feels really clear to me. I totally sympathize with the fact that the matter is complicated and the wording is going to be complicated and we will need to be really thorough in our information meetings. I agree that the flow chart is super helpful. I think also for me, this narrative is helpful because it answers that most fundamental question of, what would we do if we ended up without the two things getting approved and a quick action in the legislature? What do we do to hold a town meeting in the spring of 2026? And we have a clear answer to that now. That would be an open town meeting in accordance with the statutes rather than in accordance with any local charter. And so with the clarity on that, it feels like we're able to move forward forward into resuming the conversation we were having around what do we believe is actually the preferred form of town meeting.
Now, I would love to hear from the public about, I like Aaron because he said he liked the flow chart. But does anyone else have any comments just specifically about what we just talked about? The cliffhanger, yes, Tom. And say your names for the camera and everything.
Should we go to the mic or?
Yes, please.
Actually, with this meeting, the whole room is mic'd, so
Yeah, you can say where you are.
Stop burping. Tom Franks, District 9. I think the voters can handle it. I think you will make it clear, the town will make it clear, and I can't guarantee anything, but I bet you there are going to be a bunch of citizens trying to make it clear. So both for and against so there'll be a lot of noise about it. Just to point out, the voters did have a interesting ballot, somewhat challenging, on March 4th. It was, which one of these 5, pick one only. And if you pick more than one, your vote doesn't count. And I do not know how many votes didn't count because they picked more than one of those options. It might be worth following up, but I suspect our voters can handle it. Thank you.
We'll pick the Tom line.
Yeah, the other Tom. Tom Grasso, Brattleboro resident and voter.
First of all, Hannah and Kate, thanks again for making this so clear for us. I agree. I think, I know everybody, like I said last week, everybody gets information in different ways. So we can't expect that everybody will come to a meeting to learn about why they're voting on something. But I think we have to trust that everybody can figure out how to vote for themselves and decide based on the information that they've gotten. So I think this is the right way to go. Thank you.
Dick DeGray, District 8. If anything, I think the biggest obstacle is what the charter changes itself are. Not RTM question, because people want, that's self-explanatory. But you're asking them to adopt the charter changes in the same ballot. And that's where the public needs to be totally informed. Now, do I think that they would be any more informed by your actions if we had separate votes? I don't think so. Because you have this, but you're gonna go out, you're gonna present at a or a couple of select board meetings. You'll have meetings in every district. You'll be hopefully sending out a mailing to show all the charter changes. So I definitely think that this can be done on one ballot. I think we have a electorate that's involved in our town. They've shown that they've been involved in our town. And so I think it would be a little bit disingenuous to say, we don't think they're smart enough to figure out that we can't do this in one ballot. So I would strongly support one vote for both articles.
Christina Cheyenne, District 8. Yeah, this is very, very helpful, and the flow chart is awesome. And I just want to know what is the process to get RTM back. I think
townwide vote.
it doesn't, so it wouldn't have to be ratified by the legislature, governor to.
Well, you would probably have to put in all the charter changes again on how it would operate. But this statute also allows for a vote of a different form of representative town meeting. And earlier on in the same statute sets out how a town can vote in a representative form of voting.
It's just as easy to get rid of RTM as it is to bring RTM back. That's what I wanted to also hear in this conversation.
And
Okay, so you're asking if we vote for open town meeting and then it turns out we don't like it, how do we change it back? Is that your question?
Yeah, I think it's germane to the conversation when you're figuring out how to get rid of something, to also figure out what it means if you change your mind in the future.
That's all laid out in the statute.
So
any town with a population over 5,000 can vote to establish a representative form of meeting.
And the process, and we have the chair of the select board here, who we're gonna go and talk to, officially, because we're just talking about this now.
This is unofficial.
This is unofficial, I know, listen. And we talked to, Hannah and I met with Bob Fisher today, and went through, and Hillary Francis, and the approach that we wanna take, and we hope that the select board will help us with this, is we obviously have limited authority as 6 people. We can't put anything on a ballot unless we go out and get 400 whatever signatures. So we're gonna have to go to the select board and ask them to be the ones that warn the vote on rescinding town meeting or discontinuing town meeting. And again, that's per state statute. Then we're going to have to ask them to warn the townwide vote to adopt the charter. But it means that they will have to adopt the charter changes. So there's like, it's a three-step process. We go and ask three things. Will you warn the vote to discontinue representative town meeting? Will you adopt the charter changes that we are recommending? And will you warn a townwide vote on those charter changes? So that's how, if we all agree to do so.
Is that the order of the questions as well, because of the two-step?
I mean, you have to ask them to adopt it and then warn the townwide vote on the adoptions, but you could ask them to warn the rescission, the third question. It doesn't really, it's happened at the same time in the same way the ballot would happen at the same time.
Yeah.
I
There's
don't
three
understand what a
steps.
third thing would be, sorry, you lost me.
It's the three steps, it's the warn, we go to the select board and we say, hey, will you warn a vote to rescind representative town meeting? Oh,
Don't they have to vote on the charter changes
well,
first?
that's what I'm about to say, there's three things. Warn a vote to rescind town meeting, whatever order, but these are the three things. Warn a vote to rescind town meeting. We have to ask the select board to adopt our charter changes. And then we have to ask them to warn a townwide vote on the charter changes.
Now, I know from doing the history that there was at least one charter revision commission that made suggestions that were rejected by the select board.
And that may happen, and that's why we're gonna go talk to the select board.
My name is Elizabeth McLaughlin, I'm the chair of the Brattleboro Select Board. I just want to comment that, the Charter Commission is a creature of the Select Board. We appointed you and we set you in motion. And so of course we want to hear the results of your work. And after our review, be happy to put items on the ballot.
Thank you.
It's not we have to go to. It's an integral part of the process that we all accept.
We just wanna be, or at least I wanna be respectful of knowing that it's you folks and everybody in town knowing what the real process is, so thank you. Andy.
Andy Davis, District 9. One is just a comment. I, again, read through the history of RTM, and if you go to brattleboro.org, I don't know if you've looked at it, the entire second half is devoted to the turbulent 60s, when RTM was for a short time voted down. There was the whole problem with the state, and it's almost like deja vu all over again. The whole problem about how do you get out of RTM. There was legislative action, it was then voted out. Then there was questions about the process. It was voted again by a slightly more margin, like about 10 votes. Then there was a couple of recounts and it ended by resoundingly being voted back into operation. It's a fascinating tale that nobody could make up and probably could only happen in Brattleboro, Vermont. But I would recommend you look at it because it shows some of the conflicting views about RTM, and it's almost like it could have happened in the last 10 years because much of this debate, the same issues are in there, and it's amazing. Like Faulkner said, the past isn't over, it's not even past. But the other more substantive thing I wanted to say, I would recommend people read that, is, and I'm glad to hear you saying that you're just going over these options, you haven't actually moved in this direction, although I'm thinking as a sort of political theorist, amateur of course, you have two choices here in the flow chart. One is to keep things the same, and the end result of with RTM, and the end result is the charter changes are tabled, okay? And yes opens up the charter changes. So I'm wondering, I'd like to just comment before you answer it, show you why I'm asking this, but the question is, we don't yet know what some of the other fundamental things being proposed in the charter are. And this may be a silly example, but this is why I'm asking it. If a family put before their children whether to buy a new car or keep the old car, and if you keep the old car, you don't go on vacation, but if you buy the new car, you get to go on vacation. It's not really a fair, from a philosophical point of view, it's not really a fair vote because one comes with extra stuff. And I'm just curious, what are some of the things, are you too early to reveal some of the other interesting initiatives you've got in the charter changes, because I feel like you're putting before the voters, and it's not because they're not smart enough. I just think it's a bit of a conflicting. One is to keep the same, and then the charter has to go away and the process start again. Or, oh, I like these three things in the charter changes, so I'll get rid of RTM to get those other charter changes.
I'll answer.
So if you could comment on it, that's my question.
Well, I'll make a comment, and then I see other people. You're gonna have, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, but when this vote occurs, we'll have the whole draft charter, the new charter for everybody to look at.
Yeah.
Does that
I just
answer?
want to know what it is, what any kind of hint, what are some, is there anything substantive in there? The RTM one is very
Wait,
substantive.
just a sec, do you mean like right now?
No, I'm just wondering.
Or by the time of the vote?
Yeah, or
By the
if you
time
can
of the
hint
vote-
some of the other things, because I haven't read the current
Oh, you wanna know what you?
draft.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Are you doing any other big things?
Yeah, we are.
There is
Yeah.
no current draft because we have to put all the changes in together, but you
Yeah.
can go through our old minutes and there's a chart here that.
We have a
there's
nice chart.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on the table.
Yeah, there's a chart, and just so you know, for clarity, is that by the time this vote occurs, we will have the draft charter. It will be presented in a format where you can see what's changed. So we're not just gonna hand people a document and hope they know what's changed. It's gonna be presented so you can see what's changed. We're gonna talk tonight about what the schedule is, but my vision, which I don't know if any of the other five will want to view the same way, is that we get this done and present it to the public with plenty of time for people to see it. In theory too, not even theory, in practical nature, if we want to do this, there's a certain amount of time before the meeting or the vote that it has to be warned. And the select board are gonna have to have that document. And it's 30 to 40 days prior to the vote, we'll have to, at a minimum, have the charter done. But I think we're gonna want it done even earlier than 30 or 40 days.
Hey,
So,
I'm
yeah.
sorry, I'm going to interrupt if I may, it's a point of clarification. May I ask Andy, I understood your question to be, if Article 1 goes down and then you follow that flow chart, it says no charter changes, you're asking, would the other charter changes still have a chance? Is that your question?
Well, it's how would those charter changes influence how people think? Like, I don't want to vote for RTM because then I won't get
Yeah, I don't
charter
think it's
changes A through D.
If I understand the way the process goes, you would warn these two articles and there'd be 6 more on other changes. They would be independent of what happens to.
No, what's happening,
Okay.
there's two things. What's gonna happen is there's 2 votes. There's the RTM discontinue vote, and there's accept this whole charter.
Okay, it's not a
No.
change then, okay.
No, if everybody's.
The clarification on that was the way to present it on a ballot, because the charge on a ballot is either per word or per letter. There's no way we are going to print on the ballot the full charter. It will be a piece of paper, as long as it's available inside the voting booth with the color changes, that you can say, okay, I can see this, I can see this, I can see this. Now I'm voting on Article 2.
Could you have Article 3, which says, regardless of what happens in Article 1 and 2, these are charter changes for voting on? Let me ask that question.
No.
Like separate it, I
So
understand.
the reason we aren't going to do that is because a lot of the changes we're proposing affect a lot of different parts of the charter. So they're not like, oh, should we change, section 3B to say this? It's, because if you change that, you also need to change this part and that part and that part. So that's why it needs to be voted on as a whole, as a collective, and not as individual pieces, because the changes, some of the changes aren't even like substantively big, but they are procedurally big, like taking out gendered pronouns, taking out all of the references to the school board. Those exist in so many different places and they all sort of work together. So it would be very cumbersome to try and break them out, which is why we were saying either, yes, adopt this with the discontinuing RTM, or we'll come back at the next townwide vote and propose all of those other changes, you know, without that.
Yeah.
Because we would have to draft it differently. It's not like we can just pop that one piece out.
But it will be presented, we'll have the charter with all the little green and red lines in it. But obviously, we'll do some kind of summary so that people will understand, oh, this is what they did. But you know what I'm saying?
Two separate votes, but at the same time, the same day?
Yes.
Yes.
One is
I think for a lot of the public, that's called one vote.
well, I mean, it's two separate articles.
I know.
It's two separate articles, RTM and the charter. And I think by the time we get there, hopefully, anyone who wants to vote is gonna clearly know what we did. Janet?
From District 7, I just wanted to say, at least for the first article, you know, when I moved to Vermont, I couldn't figure out the RTM because everyone else had an open town meeting. My daughter went to school outside of town and everybody went to the open town meeting, and everyone talked about it. So I just can't imagine people who've been in Brattleboro longer than I, which is now a bunch of years, wouldn't understand what an open town meeting was. And so the idea that people wouldn't get voting for RTM or not, I mean, I think that's just self-evident for anybody who lives in the state, or mostly. Anyway.
And part of that process that we'll all go through, having discussions about it and, you know, things on the town's website and things in the newspaper, and appreciate, Tom, that you keep reminding us that people learn in different ways. So, you know, in that moment, remind us again if we don't remember. And so, yeah, we're committed. We've been talking from the very beginning when we didn't know where we might land on any kind of changes about the importance of this process and the importance of continuing public engagement. And when we get to the end, leaving enough time that there can be multiple informational meetings and other means by which we push information out. So it feels to me like naming that we need to be really thorough and careful in that moment because this is complicated is a fine thing. But it's that the fact that it's a complicated thing shouldn't prevent us from like moving forward with our work and knowing that we're going to address that challenge at that time. And I also think that this very complication, based on the fact that this complication exists and we have to deal with it based on the statutes and the legal process that we would go through when we get done with our work, speaks to me of the importance of these two things being on the same ballot, so that it can be clear in that process in the run-up to the vote about how they work together. And either we land in a place where that one day in the ballot box is sufficient and the thing gets done, or we land in one of these more complicated outcomes where there's a next step after that. But people should be able, if we do the education part right, we should get to a place where everybody understands if there has to be a second phase, why there has to be a second phase.
I'm disturbed by the fact that we're talking as if we've decided that we're going to go to open town meeting and we're going to go to this process. We haven't made that decision yet.
That's right.
Right, we know that. I think we're just making sure that we all understand the process, because that's what we were concerned about at the last
No,
meeting.
I understand that, but we're all talking as if this is the way we're going to move forward, and we haven't decided that yet.
No, I think we know that here. I think I know that. We just want to make sure, because of what we all got confused at last week, that we, at least all of us here, understand what the process is.
I want to remind people that we have not decided.
Yeah.
And we actually clarified last week that we wanted this information
Right, so
before
we can
making a
decide.
decision.
Exactly.
Yeah. And that's why I wanted to lay out what, if we get, one way or another, we have to ask the select board for a vote on the charter, no matter what it is. And those are the three things, or two things, whatever, that we have to go with the select board for as well, which factors into our timing. Tom?
Yeah, whatever you guys recommended the select board and the select board decides to warn for a ballot, I think they're really important. And to me, encouraging thing here is that contrary to what we see happening in many other places, we're following the rule of law. right? And that, I mean, I'm being, pretty serious, because this is important for taxpayers and citizens to know that we have a legal process that we follow, and that if something goes on the ballot, there's not some sort of, a potential bias that there's something about the vote that's wrong because we didn't follow the rules correctly. We are following the rules here, and we should be really proud of that. And so I appreciate you guys really thinking about it, whatever the decision is.
Thank you.
So we move back to, are we ready to move back to?
Yeah, are there any more questions right now about the process, or doesn't mean we can't have everything?
There was one comment I wanted to make in response to it. Andy Davis was saying about, past history. This statute that we have to vote to rescind or to discontinue representative town meeting was passed in 2009. So this is after all of that. I just want to be clear, so for people's historical context.
Yeah, I want to read about why that happened. You know why it was done? Because it was also done in the 60s to enable the first overturning of RTM.
This is a statute that enables any town to do it, and the original act.
Okay, sounds like it's maybe an update. Yeah, but it's still related to the history, but I'm going to look up the history of the 2009.
And just so you know too, Amy, the first thing we did as a commission is Maya and I went through every single box of prior charter change committees, and it was
like
not
4 years.
Yeah, 4 years that was not organized. It was, all papers were chucked into like all these boxes. And now we put actually a nice historical record together because we wanted to understand how the charter that we were looking at got to where it is today. So we did a thorough, analysis of it, and we did reports to the Charter Commission and to the public at the time. So
I think they're on our webpage.
they're on the webpage. So if anybody, now the town has a nice organized, here's how the evolution of our town charters came about. Okay, so do we have effort? I know, and now we're keeping it very organized, so all we have to do is nicely put it in a box and not chuck it. So are we ready for, as of right now, do we have any questions about the thing? Okay, so I think we need to get back to what got us to where we are right now, which is making the decision about what we want to recommend as the form of annual town meeting. The last time we spoke, and somebody could have changed their minds, the last meeting, we sort of had decided that total Australian ballot was not the way to go. And if somebody thinks I'm wrong on that, let me know.
I think that's right.
So otherwise, we were talking about, do we continue with representative town meeting, probably a modified version of that, or do we recommend an open town meeting? And does anyone have any more things that they want to talk about that? Peter, thank you.
I do, and I want to share something that was a new idea to me. I don't know if others of you have heard it, but I've heard it from a person in the community, and I really liked it. So I want to say what it is, and I also want to say why for me, and in the wrestling I personally have been doing among the work that we've been doing together around open versus representative. I mentioned last week what we had all seen from Arthur Davis, and that I found that interesting. I felt more curiosity than enthusiasm for it, but I found it interesting. We talked about it, and just very briefly, because it's a rabbit hole if we were to go down it in any detail. The idea was set an extraordinarily high number of seats for representative town meeting, so it's still representative town meeting, but always or almost always there would be enough seats so everybody who wants to be in the meeting can be in the meeting, but there would still be an electoral process you would go through. If there were, say, 300 seats instead of 140, it would be an extraordinary circumstance that there would be so many candidates that not everybody who wanted, who ran couldn't be in the meeting, that there would be anybody excluded. And this idea that I've heard is a way simpler version of that in terms of not doing these gymnastics over creating an artificially high number of seats, but would simply say, instead of an election, we still have a body of people who's not all the registered voters, because we've heard a lot of communication around the value in representative town meeting and people taking on a commitment to act on behalf of others in the community and to play a role in this process as opposed to being a voter who might or might not come to the meeting and can make that decision at the last minute, but to kind of make a commitment to others in the community. I'm going to go to this and I'm going to do a job. I'm going to be a piece of this. So this idea is there's a sign-up process rather than an election. And so it would be like open meeting in that there wouldn't be a designated number of seats and there wouldn't be an electoral process. But the sign-up would occur well in advance of the meeting. I'm thinking maybe, just for talking purposes, maybe it's December 1st, so that if you sign up by December 1st, you're in representative town meeting for the following calendar year, whether there's 5 meetings that year or just the 1 meeting that year, but you're an RTM member because you volunteered to commit the time and be a part of the process, as opposed to having it be a wide open town meeting in the traditional form. I personally, so I come tonight to share that idea because when I heard it, I got excited about it in a way I didn't get excited about Arthur's. I thought Arthur's was interesting, but I felt uncomfortable, and we all landed in a place where we agreed that it felt inappropriate to create this sort of artificially high number of seats and go through all the process as if it was competitive when it's not. This would just say outright, and for me, the reason why I like this is, for me, my greatest concern about representative town meeting is the electoral process. It's not the meeting itself. I think actually that, well, I won't go down there, but we can talk some more about the meeting itself if we need to. We've had a lot of conversation already about the meeting itself. For me, the reason why I've been leaning towards open town meeting is because I don't feel like the electoral process is healthy, and I don't feel like it, I feel like it is based very much on social connection and not on like political or governing awareness in terms of like who we vote for. And we've had a lot of conversation about that from different perspectives of the way in which we don't know when we look at a ballot with 30 names on it. Most of us don't know who all of those 30 people are. So, so this feels to me like it could be exciting to maintain representative form, but where people, any registered voter can volunteer to be a representative for the following year.
That's an interesting idea. Because my question tonight was going to be, people have been complaining about RTM for years, ever since, I've moved to Brattleboro 12 years ago, and I joined RTM the following year. And everybody always has complaints about it, about how people get elected, about the length of the meeting, about what happens. And it was interesting. I was saying before the meeting started that people have come up to me at Walgreens, at Hannaford, wherever, to talk to me about RTM. And I had a very interesting conversation with a young woman who recently moved to Brattleboro. And she heard about RTM and she ran. And she was at her first RTM last March, and then she went through all the special meetings and everything. And she loved it. She thought that the discussions that happened at the meeting were very important. And so that's one of the reasons why I would want to keep RTM, but not in the form that it is. We've had lots of suggestions, and there've been the steering committee that happened for RTM a number of years ago. And I think Andy, you and Kate were on it, and I don't know who else in this room was on it. But they did a survey, and there were all kinds of suggestions about how to improve RTM. And so my question for tonight was going to be, before Peter spoke, was why are we, first of all, no previous revision committee has undertaken to do any changes to RTM. I think Dick DeGray said last time there's only been one change that he knows of. And so my question was going to be, why don't we try to do something about it before we throw it away? And I like your suggestion, and I think that could be a stepping off point for other kinds of changes that we might want to make.
Does anyone else? I have a comment, but I don't want to.
I do too, but
You can go first, then I'll go.
I just want to push back on the idea that good conversations can't happen if people need to sign up ahead of time, or that someone is more engaged just because they sign up 90 days in advance as opposed to deciding that morning that they're going to go. There's no requirement that any elected official educate themselves on the issue. And there's this sort of sense that I feel like some people have pushed back on, that people think that RTM members are somehow special and that they're educating themselves, but that's not necessarily the case. And I don't know how the things that people like about RTM could be harmed by allowing more people in the room and allowing more kinds of people to participate.
Man,
Oh, yeah.
so I don't disagree about the more people in the room. I think you know that from all the conversations we've all had over many months on this. I also, though, have found compelling some of the concerns that have been raised as we've been really transparent with the community, leaning towards recommending open town meeting and hearing comments from people around what they feel will be lost if we don't any longer have representative town meeting. As I said a moment ago, for me, the electoral piece remains a concern, but the articulation of the value of having people make a commitment ahead of time, have the people who are going to be in the meeting be known, who is that, and the community knows who's going to come. If it's open town meeting, one of the drawbacks is I know if I'm going to go, but I don't know who else might be going. I don't know who to speak to, like might be there to vote also on the issues. If there's a roster of people who have signed up in December that's published as part of town report and other ways in the run up to the meeting, as a person in the community, I know who the representatives are going to be and might have communication with them prior to the meeting. I like the way in which this is a melding of what's good about representative town meeting and what's good about open town meeting. So there would be more people in the room, or at least could be more people in the room, and they'd be self-selected. But they'd be self-selected in advance in a way that creates that sense of obligation and commitment to the community, and lets the community know, come talk to me if you want to talk to somebody who's definitely going to be in that meeting.
I appreciate the suggestion, but I find it problematic from the standpoint, I just don't think that's an open town meeting, because you're
No,
saying.
it's not open town meeting.
No, but I'm saying, I think what I have heard from people is more towards it's more open town meeting, whether they're calling it that or not. And it can't be called a representative town meeting because no one's voting for you. So to say because you signed up, I'm representing you is not real either. Like nobody has said, I want you to represent me. You just happen to sign up and get on a list. Mm-hmm. So to me, we can't call that representative town meeting. You'd have to switch the name because they haven't been deemed by anyone to represent them. Do you know what I mean? You're saying, I'm just gonna sign up to go to this meeting. And I do think it prohibits people who might think a week before the meeting, you know what? I wanna go to that meeting. And that's why I like the open town meeting, because it really allows whoever wants to be involved to be able to be involved. And that's the one thing that I have taken away from this entire, discussion. I won't go through my own personal evolution here of this thing, is that, people who want to be involved should be able to be involved. And I think saying to somebody, if you want to be involved, you have to remember to sign up by December 1st. You might as well tell them you got to be elected, because there's still this thing that's stopping them months in advance from being able to participate. That's sort of where I can't get over. And I don't know what the function is, because they aren't representing anybody. If it's still to be like, well, you could still be a representative, but you're not elected, but you're a representative because you signed up, and then your neighbors know that you're the one that's going, so you can go and talk to them. It just doesn't make I can't wrap my head around why that is better. Maybe I can be convinced in a couple of minutes, but I can't.
Can I ask 2 questions? One is, if we change the name,
It's not about the name, it's about the barrier to entry.
no, I'm talking about if we adopted Peter's suggestion and we didn't call it representative town meeting, would we have to vote to dissolve representative town meeting?
No, because it would still be a representative form of government. You would have to.
But if they're not voting, no one's voting.
Yeah, that's my concern with it
Yeah.
too, and it basically creates like a first come, first serve democracy, because, like, this says that you have to vote to establish a new representative form of annual meeting, so we would have to have a vote on that too.
That's what I was asking.
And I just think that there's a lot of concern with
So,
calling it any kind of representative government when there's no
so
mechanism for
if
electing
we,
people.
my other question is, if we did some kind of hybrid system, we look at Peter's suggestion, and we also have some things that we decide will be decided by Australian ballot.
Yeah, we've talked about that.
And we've talked about having some kind of hybrid.
And we already have a hybrid though, we have to remember, because we already do Australian ballot.
But a lot of Australian ballot now is voted on by RTM members.
Right, but we're not establishing a new system of Australian ballot.
And I just have to correct what I said, I just double checked the statute, and they have to be elected members
To be
to
represented.
be a representative form of government.
To be represented, I understand.
So you're talking,
What I'm saying is, there would be things we'd have to work out. First of all, sure, we might have to have 2 votes or 3 votes, like we would have to have 2 or 3 items that we would go to the select board with under what we've been discussing earlier in the evening. So I was speaking just to what might be preferable for a governance system, not to the process by which we would get from point A to point B. And I did call it a different form of representative because it feels to me like it is, but if under the statute it isn't, then it would have to be called something else, and that would dictate also, would contribute to what the process would be. And frankly, if y'all don't see any magic in this or potential magic in this, we're gonna go back to having the conversation we've already been having, and we're gonna get to an endpoint. I thought this was worth additional consideration because of the way it speaks to me, at least, of balancing the things we've been hearing. We, as a body, we've heard a lot from the community. If it was just about, raise your hand for which you like better, we've heard a lot from the community about do everything by Australian ballot. We're done with this. The meetings are too long and whatever. And with respect to that and in engagement with that, we've come to a place where we've said we agree there's a place for some additional matters to go to Australian ballot. And we think there's real importance to having an in-person meeting, to having the community come together and talk about the hard things and get to a place together and then move on. And so in looking at, and then in that conversation, right? So then since the six of us have arrived and announced that we're in that place and we're still wrestling really hard with representative versus open, and I've been leaning towards open, but this idea spoke to me of a way in which it balances and brings together some of the more positive aspects of the things we've heard from the open meeting, the people who prefer open meeting and the people who prefer representative time.
Just a procedural matter. There is no mechanism to do anything other than ballot, representative meeting, or open meeting. We would need an enabling legislation like they had in
Right.
1959.
Right, yeah.
Well, or in our charter, if the
No,
if the legislature approved a charter with a different form of town meeting, it would be just like an open town meeting where you have to sign up ahead of time. It wouldn't be the state's open town meeting, right? But there are other people who have an open town meeting that's set forth, the details of which are set forth in their charter. They don't hold it on the second Tuesday in March. They hold it some other time in the spring and all kinds of different things. So. I know there's people in the public who want to speak. All I'm asking is that we have a conversation about whether this makes sense. And if y'all don't think it makes sense, that doesn't hurt my feelings. We'll move on with our conversation. But I don't think we should stop having the consideration of the idea because it might be procedurally complex to get there.
And it's not procedurally the thing, it's not the complexity of procedures that's stopping me, because, I mean, look at what we've been going through. You know what I mean? Let's go all these procedures. I just don't personally believe that involves everybody. You know what I mean? That's just me personally.
Yeah,
I hear that.
but I'm not sure that open town meeting involves everybody.
Well, there's never gonna be a total system.
That's what I'm saying. So that's why I kind of like Peter's idea. You know, how we get there is a whole different question, but I think it balances. If you recall that since last July, or before last July, a year ago, we heard from a lot of people about how RTM was broken and about how they wanted to make changes. And we had a lot of good suggestions. And I wonder, and we've had a lot of things happen in the past year that I think have pushed people one way or the other. And I view what you're saying as a good compromise.
Tom.
Yeah, thank you. Tom Grasso, Brattleboro resident. There's two issues here. One is that there's a group of people who want to keep this process where people can talk to each other about stuff, right? Which is fine. That's the way some people want to converse, figure things out. But then the other issue is you have to allow every single voter who expresses an interest in town government by registering to vote to have an opportunity and a fair opportunity to vote that doesn't give a bias to somebody just because they signed up for another meeting or they were the first one to sign up. So I would propose a compromise where votes that really matter to citizens in Brattleboro, and you said a lot of people want an Australian ballot, should be on an Australian ballot. You should have an open town meeting where you allow people to sign up who want to speak, share ideas, but in the end, the voters have a right to have each of their voices heard by an Australian ballot. That's a compromise, and that respects the law that we have in place, and it respects the voters and their right to express their individual opinions. And at the same time, allow people who like this process of talking things through to do that. And if that's what you're suggesting, it's fine, but if you're going to give a special right to vote to people who don't run for election, I think that's very undemocratic. And I don't think it's a solution. So.
Well, when I hear a story about, I asked someone who became a town meeting member and they really liked the process. Well, you can talk to a lot of people in Brattleboro who tried to become a town meeting member and didn't get in. And so, what about those people? Now, what Tom just said is something that I said last week about having town meeting and whether you want to expand the number or whatever. But then on the financial numbers, because some of the changes are going to be inconsequential to them, probably 99% of the electorate. But the human service budget, the budget, and any bond issues would go to an Australian ballot. Now, I don't have a problem with an open town meeting, but I still believe that because not everybody's gonna go. And the issue, and so I kind of agree with Kate to a certain extent, is that we open this up, but I still believe we should go to an adoption of a ballot vote for those large ticket items. I don't think you can just go, okay, sign up here. And if you don't sign up, you can't go. And there's no number on that, is there, Peter? So if 1,000 people come and sign up, and what happens if you got something going on and you missed a day? I mean, I can throw enough dong at the wall to blow holes in your whole theory. I think you'd have to make it a week to sign up. I don't think you could do it in one day. But the reality, you should be able to have a period of time. But then again, I agree that just because you signed up in December doesn't make you any more vested. There's RTM members that don't open that book until they get to the meeting. And I've seen that, I know that, and so I speak of what I know. And so they're not any more informed than somebody that's sitting in the cheap seats that didn't get elected but is still there and wants to talk about it. So in the last 2 meetings that I've been to, this has been like a Ouija board. And I'm going, instead of trying to hone into where you want to go, you keep bringing up different things. And, I think you should work towards, this is where we're headed. And certainly Tom's suggestion, my suggestion, from what I'm seeing, although you said you haven't made any decisions yet, hold no merit. So you at some point have to decide
We're deciding tonight.
where you're going. You're gonna decide tonight, then,
Well, if we're gonna move this process forward and get it done in this year, we have to decide tonight. I'm gonna go to Timothy.
Yeah, I got
Timothy Belknap,
Tom.
RTM9. I'm getting a little feedback, sorry. I'm just wondering if you guys had a chance to actually read what I emailed in earlier this week. And I think it is important for us to know. First, people are afraid to speak up in this town, business owners, because we have, instead of our normal kind Brattleboro, we have individuals out there saying, yeah, no, we're going to boycott your business because we don't like what you say. Those individuals are automatically disenfranchised. And the only way of enfranchising those individuals is to bring in the Australian ballot, in my opinion. I think that's super important. And I like hearing what everyone's talking about here, especially Tom, and Dick. Okay. Andy, just as an aside, I'd love to read that saga of the 60s, RTM coming and going. I'd love to hear where you got that from. But back on topic, to Dick's point earlier in previous meetings, there were 11 individuals at the actual RTM who absented themselves from even voting. And I'm going to tell you, that's not representative town government to say, yeah, no, I'm not even here. I'm abstaining from the vote. 11 individuals. So anyway, just putting that out there. I thank you very much what you guys are doing. But let's keep in mind that Australian ballot really is the way of really enfranchising absolutely everyone out there.
Andy.
Oh, so many issues. I do think it's a great conversation to be having. Democracy is not, famously, it's the worst form of government except all the others. An open town meeting, whoever comes, if 100 people come or 300 people come, they are representing the public. There's no process, and I'm not arguing. arguing against open town meeting in Vermont is pretty much impossible. It really, you've got no footing, because that is part of our brand in Vermont, the open town meeting. It's like more pure than the Greeks. But there's problems in towns that have it. They've switched to different meeting days. There's issues about who can get off from work, who works on the weekends is disenfranchised. So every year at town meeting, there are articles across the state about, is this such a good thing? And we always say it is. So that said, I want to add this. Whoever shows up to the meeting is representing the town. I think we get hung up on the idea that RTM is a legislature. The select board is our legislature. The votes are all recorded. Everybody knows who votes which way. The next election comes up, we change who's leading the town. That is where we have our representatives who put forth the budget. RTM is if you read in the charter, its goal is to be a source of new ideas and conversation and reflection on the direction of the town. It is not a legislature. It's not it isn't. The select board is, and every vote on the select board is recorded. You could look on there and say, I'm not going to vote for that person. They're always voting for stuff I don't believe in. And the next election comes up, and we just had that. We had a big changeover in the select board that reflected people. So we have what people are saying they want. We also have this unique thing. So I'm just going to give, this is the last time I'm going to speak in this process. I do believe that, I like Maya's commenting on, we haven't really talked about improving town meeting. So there could be many things, but the two that I would focus on very briefly in the last year that I think are the source of grumbling that I hear, and I don't hear too much grumbling about it, but the two things I hear are the way the caucus elections happened at the special town meeting. There was one question on that meeting, and it was very susceptible to people inviting their friends to come who felt the same way they did. And some of us were ready to start the meeting and waited over a half an hour while there was this whole shenanigan going on in one of the districts, I don't know which one, about who was getting elected in that night. And it was a close vote. And I just feel like that could be reformed to get rid of that. When you have a special town meeting with one question, there shouldn't be people showing up in the dark and getting voted in for that one issue. I think that's not right. The other thing that happened that I think I've heard people question is what happened, did the RTM go against the will of the town with regard to the human services budget? And I actually, this is a question, maybe for the head of the select board. It seems like we kind of slipped into this thing where RTM is actually setting a number for the amount of money we're spending on human services. And I think that I'm starting to question whether that's even legal. It seems to be that the select board should set what that budget is, give a number, and if the RTM says, well, we want to, increase the overall budget by $10,000 for this person, it's still the select board, it's still the legislature that decides if they want to make that change of priority. And I really think that we veered down the wrong road in RTM with the social service budget. And I think we veered down the wrong road with how we handled a special town meeting with one item on the ballot and a lot of people getting caucused in. And I think that would be a thing, for me, that would be a reason to vote to keep RTM, because I'm a very hopeful person. And I think some substantive changes could be made to RTM that would, we are the one and only Brattleboro, so why not have the one and only RTM? And with that, I'm going to sit and listen. Thank you very much for that opportunity.
Yeah, I had, last time, I don't know who was here, I had a proposal to split things between either RTM or an open town meeting, either one of those, and Australian ballot, which would put some items that RTM currently votes on Australian ballot, and have other things be either there are a bunch of things, voting on treasurer, town clerk, town attorney, the auditor's report, which we don't have to vote on, as I understand. So we would eliminate that. Because one of the big issues about RTM or open town meeting, because I've heard people tell me, I wouldn't come to open town meeting because it's too long. And so, dividing up the responsibility and creating some kind of hybrid between the forms, I think is going to be the answer. Now the question for us is it going to be open or RTM?
Let's go to Liz and then we'll go to Erin.
I have great respect for this process that you've been going through. But I also note that you did send out a survey and you asked people what they thought. And I think you need to respect the will of the people as reflected in that survey. And I'm not hearing that.
Well, the survey was just one of a year's worth of public input. Because we started taking public input in, I have the whole thing, February of 2024 on representative town meeting. And nobody back then was even talking about some of the stuff that they were talking about when we did the survey in March of this year. So we have actually, I feel like we have listened and it's all over the place. And the one, we talked about it at 9, we had it on the agenda 9 times last year, or in the last year. And what's been interesting is watching sort of the evolution. And what we're trying to do is not react to a certain event that happened, but like listen to it all in like the total of what we've been hearing for a year. And that's why I come down to open town meeting, because the one thing everybody has said to us is they want public input. Even the Australian ballot people are saying we want some way to say what we feel. So I feel like we have been listening, but you know.
I think what you just said diminishes the survey that you just
The survey,
asked for.
Liz, the survey was 260 people who responded out of.
Yes,
And
many of them were knowledgeable people, but before you
We
did
don't
the
know
survey.
who responded. And we have had a lot, as Kate said, that was one piece. We had an open meeting at the library in which we had, I don't know, 40 people, 50 people.
But we also,
50.
I was there and you had very similar comments. You had many RTM members who did not like RTM. All I'm saying is when people in the select board have a survey and people don't respect the results of the survey, it's not democratic.
But what I'm saying, I speak just for myself, is the survey was one part of a year's worth of taking public input. And I went back before, not last meeting, but the meeting before, because I have like zero life, I went back and went through all of my notes on all the public comment, Dick's laughing. I went through all of my notes on all the public comment, read all the minutes about the public comment, and when I wanted to be refreshed, I actually back and watched the BCTV tapes. So over the last year, we've heard a lot of people who say, we don't like RTM, we want it to be fixed. We've heard people saying, I like RTM, but I want it to be fixed. There's some people that say, I don't like RTM at all, it should be open town meeting. And then it was really, I was the first person at the end of last year to bring up Australian ballot. Australian ballot did not come up here until the end of 2024, and I was the one that brought it up.
Yeah.
So, and then it came up again in March. So we've had and I have all the comments written, I typed them all up just in case we ever want to look at them, for everything, from literally February 2024 until now. So it's really been It's totally mixed. I think we have equal a number of people that say Australian ballot, say RTM, say open. And I think for me, it's like digesting all the comments, and the one comment that is literally universal, and everybody else can tell me when I'm wrong, is that people want a way to weigh in. So we've been grappling with, if we don't want to do something now that next year people are gonna go, wait a second, that was a really bad idea, because we're reacting to something that, people aren't, as Andy's talking about, there are people that are upset about what happened at RTM in December, and I think we've been trying to take this view of what we're doing isn't just about one point in time, and it's really about listening to and it's been actually really, really fascinating, the evolution of everything, but, that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and just one other thing, just for how broad the input has been. We actually have received suggestion that we stick with RTM and reduce the number of seats in order to create competitiveness for those seats. But then we actually gave that brief consideration and said that makes the whole situation less accessible to the community. So there's no way we're going to do that.
Yeah.
You came to the select board and you were thinking about having something on the March ballot. You chose not to. But at that time, you said that you haven't been getting the input that you wanted, and you wanted more public input. So then came the survey, and I think you're minimizing the impact of the survey, and I don't think that's fair to the people who responded to the survey.
And you got to read the comments on the survey.
I read the survey.
Yeah.
I read the comments.
Yeah, and it's still universal. We want to weigh in. Oh, yeah.
We have been talking all night about putting this to a townwide vote and letting the town decide.
Yeah.
So I don't understand how that is us not respecting what everyone wants.
But what you're putting on the town vote is what you're deciding now.
Aaron, District 7. Andy, I really appreciate your comments about changing RTM, and I think it's important, the caucusing point you brought up, to prevent that kind of thing from happening, I think is truly important, because that circumvented democracy right there. My concerns, I have many, and I don't know which way I really want it to go, but if we have an open town meeting, I don't know what kind of a turnout you're expecting, and I really appreciate what you guys have been doing. I can't imagine the work and the struggle, but have you entertained what that may look like? What if 1,000 people show up? Where do we have it? How long is the budget process at that point? Because we already have an 8-hour meeting. Are we going to have 3 8-hour meetings because everybody's going to weigh in? Like, how does that work? Have you looked at that?
Obviously, we haven't gotten into the details, but I can tell you this, and this is, Bob Fisher, Hillary, and Hannah and I met today, and Hillary's perfectly comfortable with it. I'm saying stuff now that I don't want to be in the paper because the school system has no idea that I'm about to say this, because it might not be in the schools. But we talked about, say, 1,500 people all of a sudden decide to show up. There are facilities in this town that we could have like overflow spaces. So we've talked through how that would happen. And Hillary is, but she has actually ended up being really comfortable, because we went through all the different scenarios of what if this happens, what if that happens. Obviously, there's a scenario that we haven't thought of, but Hillary's very comfortable with if this is an open town meeting and the different scenarios so that everyone can speak. And part of it is moving stuff to Australian ballot, and so haven't dotted the i's or crossed the t's, but the space issue, we know how we can handle it.
And I also just want to point out, if we wanted to move fully to Australian ballot, we would still have to have this vote to discontinue RTM.
Yeah. Peter, I'm joking.
Oh, did you have?
No.
I want to be careful that I'm not like trying to badger people about the thing that I brought into the room tonight that I had heard that I think has some merit. We've heard some positive response to that, some negative response to that, and I don't know where that's going to land, but I'm not at this point expecting that we're going to do this. But I would just say that logistically, one of the advantages of having people sign up ahead of time is you know how many people are going to be in the room. So that's one of those balancing act things that drew me to thinking like that's actually a pretty cool idea, that it would function like open town meeting, but with just enough extra structure and advanced commitment that we would actually know. There might be a year when there's a lot going on and there's 1,000 people who sign up to come and participate. And so then we need to set up the meeting in such a way that we can accommodate 1,000 people participating. I think our shared expectation based on history here and elsewhere is, it's more likely that there might be somewhere between 100 and 200 or 300 most of the time. And there's lots of rooms that can accommodate that.
Not opposed to increasing the number of RTM, but I still think it needs to be put to a vote. If you have a ballot with 300 people, 100 people per district, so be it. But I think if it's just a volunteer basis, it still could be circumvented by, coordinated factions.
Sure, and that speaks to actually Andy Sons Arthur's idea of set that number of seats really high and you effectively get an open meeting.
What I want to do is, just one second. What I want to do is just take these public comments, and then I think we need to regroup and figure out where we're going, because we're going to be here till midnight, if that's okay. And I want to go to the, Susan Belleville hasn't said anything, so I'll go with her, and then we'll go back.
Hi, thank you. I hope you can hear me. Okay, excuse my dog. So I really need to reemphasize Australian ballot. Speaking for the aged population that has difficulty sitting through a 2-hour meeting, never mind one that may go 6 to 8 hours. Young families where the parents want to participate, but they have very busy lives, having to dedicate the time to attend either an open meeting or an RTM meeting. It is so time prohibitive for most people in this world today, this highly busy world. And it would be giving all of those individuals an opportunity to vote, because they can do absentee ballot, they can do the day of. It gives them the opportunity to vote. Voting for a person to be your surrogate in town meeting or even RTM doesn't give you the warm fuzzy of casting your own vote based on what you input into the process. Again, I'm speaking for people who cannot sit through that kind of meeting to do an RTM or an open meeting. It is just so time prohibitive. And the only fair way to give everyone a shot is our Australian ballot. Thank you.
Janet, and then we'll go to Christina and Tom, and then we'll go back to Timothy.
And just particularly sort of like the working class people in the community, they're the ones that you lose. I mean, they would come and vote on some of these issues because they really care about the police budget, they care about the human service budget, they care about these issues, but they wouldn't come and spend a whole day. It's just not fathomable. And I did want to say, just and respectfully, I'm originally from New York, so I don't always sound quite as respectful, but I don't want to vote on the Australian ballot on the little piddly things like who has this job and who has that job. Like that helps the RTM, right? So it kind of gets things out of their way so they don't need to deal with the little things. But it doesn't help me as a voter. I don't want to run for the RTM. You didn't hear my last name because I didn't say it, because I remain very cautious about this town. I read the Facebook page and I see the way people behave. And so like the business owners that are concerned about their businesses, I have that same exact feeling. And I don't want to be out there like that, but I do want to vote. I feel like my vote was my participation in the select board meetings, which I came to, was completely devalued. I'm sort of outraged, nicely, but I am. I couldn't believe what happened. And here I am sitting here another night because they do care and because they care about these issues. So my first, vote remains the Australian ballot. This is, really important to me that I have a voice in the community. So.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah. Oh, sure.
So if, I don't know if you were here last week or whenever, and I suggested that we do a hybrid where we do certain things on Australian ballot and certain things in some form of town meeting. What do you?
I want the budget. I want the important things that are impacting the town. So who gets what job, and I don't, the smaller issues that take up, time at the RTM they're really of limited interest to me. But those big issues, it's why I've come to the select board. It's why I've come to other meetings. It's why I've come to pre-RTM meetings, even though I'm not on the RTM, because they care about them. I have an adult daughter who cares about these things, who's come to some meetings, and we are invested. I'm not speaking on her behalf, however, so don't.
So if there were, so if some issues were put on Australian ballot and other issues were left to RTM, you could live with that. Oh, transfer the unassigned fund balance.
That's important.
But some of these things we talked about, like doing a consent agenda thing
Yes.
at the open town meeting
Yeah.
or representative town meeting.
And making it shorter.
Right.
And I'll tell you my fear about Australian ballot on the budget. And that is that everybody that's commented and has said there has to be some kind of open discussion and some way to amend it. And in towns where they have only Australian ballot and the budget gets defeated, then where does that leave the select board?
I think we know where it leaves the select
Yeah.
board.
Yeah, we just take out RTM.
You know why the budget was
We still
defeated.
didn't know why.
You didn't know why? You didn't hear the discussion and what people said at RTM when we rejected the budget?
There were a lot of different things.
Yeah, there were a lot of things, people had different reasons, but you heard what people said about the budget before the budget was defeated. And if we go to purely Australian ballot, that doesn't happen. And that's one of my concerns.
But didn't I say that having RTM, but letting the taxpayers ratify your votes? And if you eliminate me on voting for the big ticket items, I can't support that. I'm still not being represented.
No,
That's all
I
it's
didn't
squat.
hear, okay.
But I
So you're
understand what
saying-
you're saying, and if you want to make amendments, I'm all for that. But at the end of the day, the taxpayers need to get to vote on the big ticket items. That's what everybody's saying about Australian ballot. You want to amend it up, you want to amend it down, then it comes to us to say, okay, we're going to ratify this. If you don't let us do that, then all of this conversation is moot.
We'll go to Christina, then we're gonna, Timothy and Jill are gonna be the last ones, because we have to decide what we're doing. I mean, at least procedurally what we're doing.
Thank you. Christina Shayanya, District 8. I just wanted to, before you vote, just point out that it is very possible that the town will not vote to dissolve RTM.
And that's fine, that's fine with us. We're doing our best to recommend to the town what we have heard. And if they can sit there and say no, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. That's the process. That's the process. Okay, we're out of time. We gotta move on from.
Oh, I thought you were gonna go with it, okay.
But you get,
That was it.
Thank you. Maya, thank you for bringing up hybrid town meeting. I was interested in this. I sent a message to the entire group of you. I think maybe the first was April 9. I said, have you done the research? And I didn't get an answer. Well, I did. You didn't. Then I offered again to do the research into a deeper dive into hybrid town meetings because, and I said, I'm willing to do it, but like you, I'm busy and don't want to duplicate any of your efforts. And the response back was, oh, we'll talk about it tonight. And then I asked again. So I have volunteered at least 3 times to do research into hybrid town meetings, and it sort of sounds like you haven't done it yet. Have you done the research into how other towns do hybrid town meetings? So you know that they do have open town meetings, and the budget goes to vote the next couple days, right? You know that happens. You know that there are different processes.
Yes, and in that exchange that we had, you saw that there's several different ways of hybrid that it's done, but for the most part, where there is a meeting, it's an informational meeting and then a townwide ballot. It's not a town meeting with all that we've been discussing about the value of what happens when people listen to each other, wrestle with things, and land in a place, including amendments. So it's not that it can't be done. I'm sorry?
That does provide the information when a town ballot goes down. How many?
Most places, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, okay, you were about to say most.
Most places that have, at least where it's set forth this way in their charter, where they have Australian ballot, they have an information meeting like we have an information meeting. But think about how that information meeting is for clarifying an understanding of what's in front of you as opposed to actually having the community have a conversation about it.
I'm not seeing a substantive difference between having the community have a conversation about it, either being able to amend it or not, just being stuck with the ballot. It's still a conversation, it still provides information if the ballot's rejected. I have seen in my years in representative town meeting, articles come up that were sort of thrown out by the RTM and not necessarily fully considered, fully hatched, and that can be problematic over time. I think that there is a very strong process to having the information, having the communication, and we could design our own hybrid. For example, start with the budget process in informational assessments, which we already have in, the first one's usually October, November at the Selectboard. And if you know that you're going to be an Australian ballot, it might actually improve some of the communication that you're so eager to support. My observation of representative town meeting is, and Kurt Lyons, who didn't do the survey and had a very poor response rate, is, but over time there's been very few minds changed at RTM. And that sort of argues against the value of that discussion. If people are going in there with their goal and their goal only, and I think we saw a couple RTMs of that nature in the last several years.
Well, I've changed my mind at RTM.
Good.
I just want to say that.
Well, some people are open-minded. Thank you, Maya.
Let's go.
But let's go to hybrids.
Let's go to Jill, then we'll go to Tim, and then we're gonna let Steve be last, and we have to move and figure out what we want to do.
Hi, hoping you can hear me.
Yeah.
Hi. So thanks again for all the work on this. Just want to say for me, it's just such a clear thing. One person, one vote. I've never understood this idea of representative town meeting in Brattleboro, to be very honest, and I've been on it many years. If I'm a taxpayer and I want to have a vote on the budget, I should be able to have a vote on the budget. And here that just doesn't happen. The discussion part, I mean, this is kind of a Vermont unique thing. It's special. And so I love the idea of an information night where people can get together and ask a lot of questions and have those community discussions. But it's an unwieldy idea. It's already difficult. It goes on for hours on hours. It's why I think there's been such low turnout at representative town meeting for many, many years, until you get to the point where people are irate and hot and came in like they did this year. So just It's easy. Have an information meeting. Just Peter, you just explained what other towns are doing. It sounds perfect. Informational meeting, discussions, people talk amongst themselves. They can have smaller district meetings, get together however you wish. But the final thing, I'm with Dick DeGray and a lot of other people are saying it. And I'm also hearing Liz when she's saying, this survey was out there. And that was, for me, I've been waiting to have input on this for years. And I even asked when you guys had first talked about it and it showed up in the paper, I'm like, wait, they're finally talking about it. And then you came to the select board and you said, no, we're going to talk about it more. We're going to have it on the ballot. I'm like, great, people are going to actually get to have a chance to see. Maybe I'm the only one in the whole town that thinks that one person, one vote doesn't work. Let's see what people are going to say. And instead, then it got pushed along and pushed along. To me, the only place that I had a chance to do any input was emails to you, in which I did say, unlike what Kate says, nobody says get rid of representative town meeting. I did say that directly, get rid of representative town meeting with the authority of a vote. If you want to have discussions, perfect. Have discussions outside of it, but not the vote. And the survey was the only place I can do it. But summarizing, one person, one vote. Thanks.
Just to clarify, Jill, I didn't mean to say no one told us they didn't like town meeting. All right, no one told us not to get rid of it. Whatever. People told us everything. We had people tell us to get rid of it, keep it, fix it, blah, 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 blah. So we've heard it all. Okay, we'll go to Timothy, we're gonna go to Steve, and then we're gonna figure out what we're doing next.
Timothy Belknap, District 9. Once again, I'll make it snappy. So your Survey Monkey that you put out there, it was highly publicized. You had 260 people who responded to that. I've actually read through all of the notes that people have written, and it's come back at about 70% of the populace in town that responded to that Survey Monkey said, yeah, no, RTM bad, gone. All right. And that 260 people, by the way, is 100 more than the people that supposedly represent us in RTM. So I don't know how we can possibly look at that survey and come up with any other reasoning around like, oh yeah, people liked RTM, which I heard earlier tonight. The other thing is that the community safety review process also did a survey monkey, and 128 people responded to that. And from those 128 submissions, we've actually created real policy. So let's put some weight behind that Survey Monkey that you actually highly publicized, and a lot of people responded, and a lot of people wrote a lot of notes in there. That's it. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay, Steve, and then we're gonna.
Steve Zaluzzi. I strongly agree with what Dick has mentioned and Tom. It sounds like good ideas that they've come up with. I also want to mention that the RTM, I want to move away from that, in my opinion. What I see happening is we've got special interest groups involved there, and to me, that's not a good thing. It's moving further away from true democracy. So, thank you.
All right, thanks, Steve. Okay.
Can I make a proposal?
Oh, yes.
I would propose that we decide now whether or not we are going to ask the select board to warn a vote to discontinue the representative form of government, and we can continue discussions about what that new form of government looks like at some point after this. But at least we're making that decision so that we can start formulating what another model would look like, regardless of whether that is an open town meeting, Australian ballot, or some hybrid, because in either event, we would have to have that vote. So I think that we can have that vote now to guide us in a direction.
Now that supposes that, I know what you're saying, yeah. I was gonna say, that supposes that we're gonna say we don't want town meeting anymore.
We don't want
representative town meeting anymore. But I don't know how that fits in with.
Yeah, I'm going to be annoying. I'm sorry.
Again?
Again, yeah, still, actually. Because trying to think of, like, or making sure that I phrase it right from the history of how we got here. We've had all of this time where we've been taking in information, we've been wrestling things, we've been looking at things, we've been talking about it some more. all because early on in this process, we were hesitant to dig into what would change about representative town meeting in order to make it better. Because we thought, well, if we're not going to continue with representative town meeting, if we're going to move on to something else, then that would be a lot of effort that's not put to good use. What I heard you say there, and I understand, I think it's proper framing given the moment in time we're at, but my concern about it is that it turns that way in which we initially approached this on its head and says we'd make a commitment to get rid of it and work on what the ideas might be about something else. I think I'm not personally ready to vote to get rid of it until we are clearer with each other about what the something else would be. I think that there's a great danger in saying we're crossing this threshold and saying RTM is gone and now our body of work is what do we do instead. I think I'm perfectly happy to invest deeper in either what would improve RTM or better yet, what would we do instead. I think there is a path we're on that is more focused on the instead. But until we can say, what shape that's taking, how do we know that wherever we might, we're taking a leap of faith that says we're going to land in a better place than this thing that we already have voted to discard. I think that's not the way we ought to make a decision to, I'm prepared to move away from RTM if we have something better we're moving to. Yeah. But we aren't saying that we're going to develop that idea first. I think that's an issue.
What are people thinking? Like, I am ready tonight to say what I think we should do. I'm just trying to figure out, and I don't want to pressure anybody, but I think we sort of got to know, are we thinking we can make this decision tonight? Or are we waiting till the next meeting in June? Or, I mean, I've literally absorbed, as I say, I'm like, have no life and I read all this stuff constantly. I have been thinking of everything that we've heard. And I've heard everybody tonight and heard everybody, there's lots of people that aren't here that have given us their positions on stuff. So I know where I think we should go based on everything. I could say it right now, but I don't know if everybody else. I think we just need to figure out if how much more time do we need to figure this out, I guess is my question for everybody. To figure out, what is it that people need? I think I asked this like 2 meetings ago, the last meeting or whatever. What is it that we need to be able to make this decision? I feel like I've heard everything I need to make this decision, but that's just me,
As somebody who was, to help you along with this, as somebody who was on the fence, I feel comfortable making a decision tonight. I think we need to do that and move on. Move to the next process step. And I feel like I can make a decision tonight.
But where's everybody else?
I agree. I mean, I think that there's a lot of discussion about what the specifics of a new form would look like, but I'm prepared tonight to say this is the direction we want to go. Or I want to go and see, then for us to vote and see if we're all in agreement and that's the direction we want to go and head in that direction instead of continuing to consider every single possibility.
Right. Yeah. That's where I think I am.
Me too.
Yes.
If we adopt the suggestion that we go to the select board and tell them we want to warn something that I think I would like to know, I'm with Peter, I would like to know what we would replace RTM with.
I think that I just to jump in, that I think that we need at least the vote amongst us and the direction we're moving. Maybe it's not to warn because we need to hear the words, but to me it feels like sort of procedural of Robert's rules, you have to put the proposal first, vote up or down, and then you give your reasons, yay or nay, or like, you know, like hash it out afterwards. We have to get the vote done first.
Because I think are you thinking that we're going to what Hannah proposed originally, was saying we want to get rid of town meeting? Because I think now we've looked back to saying, I think we're prepared, some of us are prepared to say tonight what form we think we should recommend. So we could do that tonight. And whatever that, if the majority of us want to keep RTM, then we know we're not going to ask for it to be rescinded. But if the majority of us decide, no, we want to move away from RTM, I think the thing is, we have to figure out sooner or later what we're recommending. And can we do that tonight? Because we can go through this loop like for the next 6 months, you know?
I think if we have to wait and put out a fully
Right.
thought out proposal for both options before we decide which direction we're going, that's an enormous waste of time.
Right.
That's not what I'm suggesting. I am suggesting that it's premature to reject utterly, especially the one that requires this statutory process, when we don't know what we would be going to. So I'm happy if the place that we land, I mean, we might also need to clarify with each other, what do we mean by make a decision tonight, right? So if the place that we land, that we were almost landing in last week until issues of procedure arose, is that we think we want to move to an open town meeting. I could support that, but not the way that it was framed, Hannah, and your suggestion that we declare that we're done with representative town meeting, we want to have a townwide vote to get rid of it. I'm not prepared to support that. I am prepared to support not spending more time on refining RTM if what we want to do is build instead of something better. But I want to see, we looked, for the first hour this evening, we looked at a process that is rigorous and complex, but makes a lot of sense. And we talked it through and we landed in a place where people who disagree about what we ought to do agreed that that's actually something we can do. Like if that's where we land, that's not a task we can't handle together as a community. So, but that task presumed that these two questions go before the voters at the same time. Rescind RTM, do this other thing instead. And the voters are going to decide whether that ends up in a sort of clean path forward or a more complex path forward. But I don't see any reason tonight why we need to decide the rejection of RTM piece and then work for weeks on the other thing, which we're going to need to work for weeks on the other thing. Let's work for weeks on the other thing. If that's where we want to go, I'm with that. But let's further develop that idea to see if we like what it develops into. Because if it doesn't develop into something that feels better, that we can all rally around, then I think we could deeply regret that first vote and might in fact have to revisit the first vote on RTM. There may be ways to improve RTM if we can't land on a system that's better. So if we put the energy into what would be better and we don't land in a satisfying place, we could go back then. I understand that would get us off our calendar onto a different calendar, but we could go back to then putting energy into what would make RTM better.
Because for me, making a decision means we decide what path we're going to take. I mean, you know, are we going to stay with RTM, open, or Australian ballot? Because to me, that
Or hybrid.
Or well, I keep thinking we have one. That's right. So or
Take
hybrid.
the vote.
So I don't think we have to go to we're going to rescind something tonight. I think we need to know.
Okay, fine. Not decide to discontinue RTM, but decide that we are not going to discuss refining RTM. We are going to move in the direction of an open or Australia. Like we need to just decide that
which way we're going.
Like, you know, we're not going that way. And you know, I'm sort of like showing my cards here a little bit about how I feel about this, but for me, there's really no distinction because, you know, asking for that to be, you know, saying that we're going to recommend moving that direction is functionally no different than saying we're going to table RTM because I don't. Maybe I'm phrasing it wrong, but we arrive at the same point, and I'm ready to say this is the direction that we need to head in tonight.
We only arrive at the same point if we come to a satisfying outcome on the work that we would be about to be doing around what the unknown alternative will be. That's why I think it's premature to make the other decision. Let's start working on the alternative.
Right. That's what I think. I think we need to decide tonight what the alternative is. That we start working towards.
Thank you.
Will you
And
phrase
for
the
that.
question then for us that we can?
Well, the whole idea now of having people sign up has thrown a loop in, like a wrench in my mind, because I don't know what that means. Do you know what I mean? Like, I, as we know, because I've already said this, I'm in favor of open town meeting. But if it's an open town meeting where people are signing up, that's different than what I envision an open town meeting to be. So tonight, I'm just saying, I'm not saying anyone's gonna vote this way, but say tonight we wanna go open town meeting. Then we work out the details, and we may hit a wall. This is the thing, we may hit a wall. Where if there might be a detail of, well, you gotta sign up to be an open town meeting. There may be we'll hit a wall somewhere, whatever we do. I don't know how to deal with that. Like, how do we, because that's a very specific thing, is having people sign up. It's more specific than, let's go open town meeting as opposed to representative town meeting or Australian ballot. So.
I feel like the question that is being asked of us right now is the path that is the procedural process that we're moving towards.
Yes.
And that's the question.
Right.
To
me.
And then now, and once we share, then that is the path that we continue to work down and hash out the details.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't want to get in my mind, the whole we have to sign up thing takes away from the open. I think we have these three things to pick from.
May I make a motion?
Yes.
I move that the Charter Revision Commission commits to developing a plan for what we will recommend as a replacement for the current representative town meeting form of town meeting in Brattleboro.
Hasn't that been the plan the whole time?
Yeah, that doesn't get us anywhere.
We don't have a plan, right? Unless the plan is just, we're gonna have open town meeting. But if there's something more complicated, and I think there is, based on everything we've heard, and the hybrid idea, and how much is gonna go to Australian ballot versus how much is gonna be done in the meeting. And Dick's idea of, is there gonna be a meeting that looks every bit like the meeting we've been having, but the outcome of that meeting, at least on the budget, goes to a vote of the town? I think there's a whole bunch of details. And getting those details right matters more than making this decision tonight, in my opinion.
But I think to me, the decision, so we're basically not deciding anything, because, you know, in front of us, we've always seen 3, and I know 4, but I'm just gonna say 3. 3. Australian ballots an option, open town meetings an option, and representative town meetings an option. And we've always had a hybrid, because we always had representative town meeting and Australian ballot. So to me, the thought was tonight we'd come away with, okay, we think that out of those 3 options, and again, with hybrid mixed in there, we're gonna come out with option B as opposed to option A. You know, we have A, B, or C option. That we'd at least come out with, we're gonna head down the path of option A. But that motion doesn't give us down the motion. We still have like the 3 roads.
What I said, and we'd have to go to the tape to get it right because I won't remember it exactly how I said it. What I was actually trying to meet y'all in the middle. I'm concerned that we're getting ahead of ourselves by dismissing RTM completely when we don't know what the system will look like, right? What will we recommend?
Right.
I'm happy to move in a direction of actually spending our time together shaping what that looks like. So then we can land some weeks from now and saying, that's the thing. That's good. Now we're ready to say that instead of RTM. Or maybe we don't land there and it gets more complicated again. But so the way I was trying to express the motion was that we as a group resolve to work on shaping the thing that would replace RTM so that, in my opinion, so that I stopped there rather than getting like a 5-paragraph motion. But my explanation for why I said our agreement tonight is to work on what would be the new system of town meeting to replace RTM is so that we can actually do that work and arrive at a place, hopefully together, where we say, yeah, that's going to be a better system. Then we can address the whole of moving away from RTM, moving to this thing. But until this thing exists, we're saying, I think prematurely, we're done with thinking about RTM, we're going to develop something else. Well, I don't know where that something else is going to take us.
Can I second his motion?
Well, I actually wrote his words down if you want to hear them.
I just want to go back, because now you said, Peter, like, but you're not using the word replace RTM. You're not definitively saying we're doing something.
What I said in the first instance, maybe Tom got it verbatim, maybe he got the essence. What I certainly intended to say was that we'd be working on what would replace RTM. And we'll get to a place where if we are happy with what we come up with, then we'll easily, unanimously leave RTM behind. But we were asked a few minutes ago to declare that we're leaving RTM behind. We've made our decision. We're going to form something else. I don't know what the something else is. If what we were saying, and I don't think we're there, I think we've heard a much more complicated conversation. I think we've had a much more complicated conversation. And if what we were saying is we're done with RTM because what we want is an open town meeting, sure, that's nice and clean and clear, and I think we could make that decision. But that's not what we're saying. We're saying that there would be some combination of things that would go on. And
I'm just trying to figure, I'm personally just trying to figure out, I get what you're saying, but I also think this is what we've been doing at all these meetings, is figuring out what direction we want to go in.
I don't think that's what we've been doing.
Well, this is I'm just saying from my standpoint. I thought what we were doing is we were going to say, we're sticking with RTM, and if we stick with RTM, we're going to make these changes to make it better. Or we're going to go to open town meeting, and this is how we're going to make open town meeting work. Because all I see us doing is if we come out of here tonight going, well, we're going to make a pact that we're going to figure it out, when does the figuring it out stop? Do you know what I mean? When we figure it out, but how do we know when? Do you know what I mean?
When we have consensus on what we're going to do.
Right.
Because right now, I don't think we have consensus.
Well, you take votes to figure out that consensus.
Right, I'm just sort of seeing that, Steve, just a sec, we're in this midst of our brain here. I'm just trying to figure out if we say to this moment, say, okay, we're gonna commit to developing something. What does that look like at our next meeting? Like, what are we talking about at our next meeting that we already haven't talked about? To figure out what that path is.
We start looking at specifics of what is gonna go where, what was gonna work where. We haven't really talked about what kinds of things, when we've talked around it a little bit, but we haven't really said, okay, these things we don't have to vote on. Nobody has to vote. We haven't said those kinds of things.
But I'm saying, how do we get to the core big decision, which is it representative town meeting, open town meeting, or Australian ballot? Because I don't know how we make those smaller decisions if we don't decide, because if we're staying with representative town meeting, then it's different than, we don't, you know what I mean? We don't, if we decide we're gonna stay with representative town meeting, then we sit there and go, okay, how can we make the election process different? But if we're gonna go with open town meeting, we don't have to worry about the election. So that's how I can't figure out there's certain things that if we go one way or the other, we don't have to worry about a whole chunk of this. So how do we sit there, and this is what I can't figure out, like, there's no path forward here to me, in my mind.
Yeah, so let me, what I tried to say, and may not have said well, is I get that problem, right? We can't just sit here in the place where it's all three being equally considered, but we're not being definitive about any particular piece. What I'm suggesting is let's start getting definitive so that we arrive at a place where we can say, this is the thing we want to propose to the community, right? And in respect for where I think a majority of us are on that question, that our energy in trying to create the thing, trying to put some details down in underline and strike out, just like we have with other sections of the charter, so that we can actually see it and talk about it and vote on it, is to do that work. And that work that we would do would presume we're leaving RTM behind. We're gonna do that work by working on what would it look like if we didn't have RTM? What would it look like if we created something else instead? But that doesn't guarantee we're gonna land in a happy place there. So all I'm asking is that we not take a vote tonight to say we're finished with RTM no matter what. I don't think we're prepared to, I'm not prepared to say that until I understand where we're headed instead.
All right, I just want to make sure that, like, at the next meeting, we're not sitting there having conversations about, well, about something that we're wasting our time talking about. That's my biggest concern.
Can I give an example of how I think what I've proposed could be useful to us? We had conceptual conversations a few times along the many months that we've been meeting around the need for some clarification about provisions related to the select board and provisions related to the town manager. And if we had had meeting after meeting after meeting talking about that without actually proposing some changes, we'd be in the same bind. But instead, you and I offered to go away and prepare some stuff to bring forward. We maybe are gonna get to that tonight, maybe that's not gonna be till next week, but there's some stuff now that the community can read and react to. There's stuff that we can discuss, and it's very precise as to, like, this is what we're proposing, and we can talk about why we're proposing it. And then we're gonna get to a place where either, like, some, much, or all, or none of that language gets approved, right? But we can have a good substantive conversation about it because there's language. And we could do the same thing it's not gonna happen in 1 week. It can't be our next, or 3 weeks. Maybe it could happen in 3 weeks. If there is some language put together that is at least the beginnings of this is what town meeting will look like at such time as we're not doing RTM anymore. And maybe, like I said, if it's the purest, cleanest, we're just going to open town meeting, that's easy. But I don't think that's where we're going based on even what we've talked about with each other, say nothing of what we've heard from the community. So we're going to go to something more complicated. Let's start writing up what that something more complicated looks like so that we can wrestle with it. Then it's a thing.
I think, okay, yeah.
But how can we do that without knowing we're not gonna have that more complicated thing be a representative form of meeting?
Because the motion, maybe we can't, maybe y'all will vote no, and that's okay, but the motion I made because I was trying to respect that you were looking for clarity in your first comment half an hour ago. Let's be done with RTM, let's get on with the discussion. And I think that's premature to be that final about it. So what I was trying to do was propose a way that we would undertake a piece of work that would actually be the essence of that. We got to go do that piece of work anyway. If we were to say tonight, we're done with RTM forever, don't talk to us about it, then we still got to go do the piece of work I've described. Let's do the piece of work first so that we can say, is that really better? And maybe it is, and then we land there and we recommend rescinding RTM. Maybe we struggle to come up with something that we think is better, and we actually come back to having a more complicated conversation about it again. I don't know where we'll land, but I think we need to do that thing first.
Can I read Peter's motion for you?
What?
Can I read Peter's motion for you so you know what you're voting on? Because there is a motion, and it may or may not be seconded. I don't know if you follow Robert's rule.
Maya seconded it.
I seconded it.
Okay, so Maya seconded something she wasn't sure what it was.
No, I knew exactly what he said.
The words I wrote down is that Peter Elwell moved that the CRC, and I put the acronym, commit to developing a plan for what we will recommend for a replacement for RTM. Does that sound like your words, Peter?
Those sound like my words.
Yeah, and that's what I seconded.
Okay, so you have a motion and a second.
As a replacement to RTM before deciding that we're done thinking about RTM forever.
Yeah.
That's the unsaid part. But those are the words.
And I would volunteer to work with Peter to come up with a concrete words that we can talk about.
Okay,
instead of talking about it in the abstract.
Is it really important? Because we're right in this midst
I
of
just,
something.
as a member of the public, Peter has expressed his opinion, everybody on this commission has their opinions, I'm sure. And so I think that I want to see democracy happen here tonight also. And if you choose to vote or not, that shouldn't be dependent on one commission member's, opinion. It should be a vote. Everybody has their own opinion. Let's.
We're all that. But I'm just saying that I would volunteer to put some words on paper so that we could start looking at something concrete.
Denise has a question.
Timeline question, just what does it do to the timeline?
That's,
Could you speak louder, sorry?
The timeline, I'm asking about the timeline, how this affects, how we get things out there.
that's, that's the next question. Very good
Another
question.
question?
Yes.
So there's at least 3 of you that have different opinions, and what Peter's talking about is if you're gonna follow through with what Peter just said, I believe that the differing opinions bring a motion to your next meeting and you vote on which action you would like to follow. And just because Peter made this big discussion about, okay, we don't know where we're gonna go, you have a different opinion about going to open town meeting. So until you figure out, and I agree with what you said, what direction, so you get to vote on somebody's motion that this is what I propose we do. And if there's 4 of you that agree with that, then that's the direction you had. That's democracy of the committee, not just, you're not gonna hear anything different. You like spinning your wheels from the last meeting to this meeting. And so what's somebody gonna say, oh God, after 2 years, we never heard that. There's anything that anybody's gonna say that's gonna change anybody's mind. So I believe if you're gonna go forward, that there should be at least 3 motions or maybe 4, whatever anybody thinks, and you vote on the one, and whatever one comes out on top, that's the direction you have to go. With doing this and discussing what Peter says, and then we go here and we discuss that one. No, you make a motion of what you want to happen, and then you vote.
I think the issue is that we don't have anything when we voted in the past, we've had actual language that we
made a
looked
motion
at.
last week. You made a motion last week of what you wanted to do.
I didn't make a motion.
It didn't get adopted.
I made a suggestion for the purposes of discussion. I did not make a motion. I did not expect it to be adopted. I made a motion so that people, I made a suggestion so that people would have something concrete to shoot at, if you want to use that term. That's what I told Kate, and I think that if we're going to go forward, we need to look at something concrete in writing. And I would be, as I said, I would be willing to work with Peter and whoever on coming up with something concrete that we can look at our next meeting.
My issue is that, what is that?
Right.
We need to say what that's gonna be.
Yeah.
We need to know what we're gonna do ahead, and we've done that in the past where we say, okay, we're gonna craft some amendments that look like this, and the next meeting that we come with that language and we vote on it. So we need to say what it is we're crafting, because if you're saying, oh, we'll come up with something, you come back with this like sign up thing, that's not what I'm signing off on. I think that's the problem.
So, yeah, I get it, and, I don't know how the way I've said like 5 times now, how it's come out, some people are reacting to it as though I want to write it, and I know the answer. I don't know the answer, and I don't want to write it, actually, honestly, all due respect. Give it your best shot. I think because of a lot of reasons, but especially, I feel viscerally how I'm the stick in the mud here in this moment. I'm sorry about that, but I am, and I am for this reason, that I'm not trying to force all of you to think what I think about the thing. What I'm trying is for all of us to face up to the fact that we don't know what the thing is. And so I don't want to declare unequivocally that we're done with RTM until we are agreed that there's a better thing. So how we were all, my motion just said, let's work on developing that. Let's work on being able to say to ourselves and to the community, this is what we think is going to be better than RTM. I think that answers your question. If it doesn't, then we need to wrestle with this some more. But the question of like, what will we work on? We will work on some combination of open town meeting and Australian ballot that will constitute a form of town meeting we think is better than RTM. And either we get there and can say what that is, or if we struggle to get there, then we'll be darn glad we didn't tonight say, we're done with RTM forever. There's gotta be something better. Like, let's put some energy now into the something better. I'm with you that you don't wanna put any energy into RTM if we have no intention of moving forward with RTM. I'm seeing that there's a majority opinion, both here and out there, to move away from it.
So-
All I'm asking is that we talk about what we're moving away to before we make the final decision to
I
move away.
suggest at the count of three, you each just all blurt out which direction you want to go, and we will count, and we will let you know which direction you're going.
This is what open town meeting will be like. People who feel entitled to just shout during your meeting.
Absolutely.
I think we do need to say what we're moving away from and work on crafting this new thing. I don't think we say right now, this is where, I think we say we're moving away from RTM. And maybe I phrased it wrong in saying like we're calling for a vote to move away from any form of representative annual meeting. I mean, I'm prepared to say that, but it doesn't seem like anyone else is. But I think we need to say, we're not looking at RTM anymore. We're gonna move in the new direction and then we go from there.
But not take I don't think what we're saying is take a vote right now to say we're gonna ask the select board to rescind it.
That's right.
You know, that's not there. I almost think we're saying the same thing, but I think some of us wanna be more definitive to move, you know what I mean? More, I hear what you're saying too, and I hear what Hannah's saying.
So I made a motion and Maya seconded it, and we can either vote on that or somebody can make a substitute motion. And I really, honestly, I don't care. I'm not trying to control this moment. If the majority of you think that we've just wasted a half an hour and I'm making it much harder than it needs to be, propose something else. Make a motion and somebody may second and we may vote on that. That'd be okay.
The thing that I wanna just make sure is that, you know, if we vote on Peter's motion, you know, vote in favor to put a plan in place to replace representative town meeting. That's the next thing is, do we need to, like, our next meeting is at the end of June. Now, are we gonna come back at the end of June and then just all, you know, what we need a process to get somewhere. I think that's part of
Absolutely.
Where, you know, and again, you know, Hannah was saying that, you know, we do, when we say, yes, when we did the whole conversation about non-citizen voting, we all came away with, yes, we want to add non-citizen voting to the charter. And let's look at some language. So I think that's sort of where I'm stumbling, like, yeah, let's put a system in place to replace RTM, but we have to have a starting place for that, you know? I can just one sec. I have, like, if you ask me to say, Kate, come to the next meeting with your ideas, I think all five of us could come with ideas, but is that the way to move forward? I don't think so.
Right,
We're
I
gonna be
agree.
beating our heads against the wall.
Totally, that's gonna be chaotic again, and I'm suggesting we actually need something that is focused on, and it can be two or three of us, or it can be some other method, but actually creating a proposed, like, let's do this, so we all can wrestle with the let's do this. That's what we don't have tonight.
Right.
As Dick pointed out, I had a proposal, which I made at the last meeting, which I didn't make it as a motion or anything, but I'm willing to flesh it out and to bring it to the next meeting as a concrete proposal of where we ought to go, which is a hybrid of open town meeting and Australian ballot. And I've heard some interesting things tonight about what should go on Australian ballot and what shouldn't. And maybe some ideas about how open town meetings should work. So I'm willing, if we adopt Peter's motion, I'm willing to come next meeting with a concrete proposal that people can say yes or no to, or fix or change or whatever people want to do. But that would be moving away from RTM to something else. But not saying, I'm not prepared to say, we're gonna discard RTM forever.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, Kate?
I mean, I appreciate that Peter's motion does say, we'll come forward, we're committed to developing a plan to replace representative town meeting. I do wish that it could be, we're gonna develop a plan and move towards open town meeting. Like, just flat out says it, because it gives us more concrete, we know where we're going. But, and we have hybrid now, like we have Australian ballot, so I don't worry about not saying we're gonna do hybrid, because we already do Australian ballot.
But the question would be, what's open town meeting and what's on Australian ballot?
Yeah.
And so that's what I would flesh out and try and propose that, so the people can say, yes, no, I don't agree, whatever.
If it makes this clearer and more comfortable for the majority of you, I personally think what you just said is what I tried to say. And the words came out in a way that caused people to think we were just gonna be fighting about stuff, instead of actually developing the plan that we are talking about developing. And so, if it works better to get to the same place, to say, developing a plan for, you used the words, if you want to have the words open town meeting in the motion, but our understanding with each other is the same, that there needs to be a plan of what that's going to look like so that it can become language, so we can agree that we want to put that language into the document before we make a final decision as a group that we are done with RTM, at least for now, at least for this cycle. That's what my motion was meant to be. So if you've got words that you're happier with that make the group more comfortable, I'm delighted to vote on your words instead of mine.
I will move to amend Peter's motion that we vote on developing a replacement for RTM that encompasses an open town meeting.
Second. And does Peter have to
Is this an
say?
amendment to the amendment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it a friendly amendment? So is Peter friendly?
No, there was no first amendment. This is the proposed amendment. I'm happy to accept that as a friendly amendment, so she doesn't need a second. We can vote on that language.
All right, so yeah, so it's basically that we're committing to developing a plan what do we say that you said that encompasses?
Hannah's words, we're developing a replacement for RTM that encompasses open town meeting.
Maybe it includes open.
Yeah, I think it includes
that
better word.
includes.
It's been a long day.
I know.
Wasn't gonna say so. but
I wouldn't
thanks for
write
using it.
encompasses unless someone said it.
No.
So I'm pretty confident about it.
No, she's saying now, I think includes would be better, and I agree. I think includes would be better.
I've been up since 5 a.m.
I know.
so tired.
So that we're
All
committed to
good.
developing a plan to replace representative town meeting.
She dropped the plan. It's developing a replacement for RTM that includes.
Developing a, thank God.
Can we agree on what the motion is?
Yes.
Please. What I heard is we're doing what I described But instead of it being amorphous as to what would replace RTM, you're injecting that it explicitly says open town meeting. I'm perfectly fine with that. And so it would still include that we're committing to developing a plan. The way Kate read it back, we're committing to developing a plan to replace representative town meeting with a system that would include an open town meeting.
Yes.
That's, we agree. We agree, that's the language we should vote on tonight.
Okay, commits to developing a replacement plan with a system that would include open town meeting.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. Are we ready to vote?
Can I I'll call a question.
Yay. Okay, is everybody clear on the motion?
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor of the, we could say the hybrid Peter Hannah motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Perfect. Anyone opposed? Great. All right, so now we know what we're doing. It's kind of know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we want to, discuss the work plan moving forward now and just figure out how we want to move forward with this new plan?
Question, if we're gonna do that, I think we need to do that.
Yeah.
If we're gonna do just that, I'd like to keep going. If we're gonna do that and some of the things we had talked about doing tonight, I'd like to already
Yeah.
do this.
How is everybody feeling? It's 9:00.
It's time to go home. Poor
Um,
Hannah needs to go home.
and I'm wondering if we want to look at, this is why the question is, looking at the calendar, because we're not scheduled to meet, and I know there's, like, everybody's got these weird June schedules. You know, we're not scheduled to meet again until June 25th.
Yeah.
So are we content with figuring out how we're gonna make this work and then coming back on June 25th with plans? Or do we need to have another meeting to figure out, like, how are we doing this? You know what I mean, that's the next thing. And, you know, Denise's overall question is, and I don't wanna put pressure on, like, what's the end date for ourselves, but that's all in the mix here. So I don't know if we wanna just finalize tonight how we're gonna move forward with what we just voted on, and then come back and do this other stuff on another, you know, do that in June or, you know, at the end of June. Because none of the other things are drop dead have to have right now.
It doesn't lead to other work.
Right. What we're deciding, like, how we move forward with what we just voted on is a domino effect
Yes.
for lots of other things.
Agreed. It seems like it would behoove us to allow that 3 weeks for whatever subgroup of us is gonna work on this, to work on it, so that there can actually be something proposed to us. You and I had a month or more to do the work we did on Selectboard and Town Manager, and you know, it started off very conceptual, and then you and I had a conversation about it, and then it became language, and then you and I met again and revised the language, and now it's a thing we can all discuss together. It feels like we wanna allow that sort of process to happen for 2 or 3 of us related to this.
I don't disagree, but I also think that we need to deal with all these other stuff that was on this meeting. And I think that those two things could happen, like we could maybe try and find a time before the next meeting.
Sure.
Address a lot of the stuff we didn't get to tonight.
Absolutely.
And that still gives us time to then, at that
Absolutely.
later meeting, talk about the new things.
100% agree.
Yeah, because the reality is, and I don't know how far we want to get into this tonight, you know, we have a outline of if we wanted to, there's no election on November 4th this year, but people, I mean, we're talking to Hillary, and she's like, you know, people think there is, so they all come into the, you know what I mean, and they'll go like, oh, it's election day. She's like, well, what are you voting for? There isn't anything. So the idea, and this is, again, this all can fluctuate, would be if we could get our acts together, get this on the November 4th ballot, it would be the only thing on the ballot, but it means that we have to have, like, the select board would have to warn this sometime between September 29th and October 4th.
Yep.
So we'd have to get this done, I would think, by the beginning of September, so that we can go around with our road show and have all the, so, you know, I mean, there's this, I still personally think we can do it. But
Not with the number of meetings we.
no, we have to add more
Right.
meetings in. Like, I think if I personally am in the world I live in, it would be great to get this done, you know, in the beginning of September and have it all done to take it out as a roadshow. And I think we can do that, but we do have to add, we'd have to add more meetings in June and July, I think, to get it all done. And maybe August. I know it's weird because it's people on vacation and everything, but.
Are you aware of more June dates that we would be available here?
No, that's what I was wondering, if we wanted to all look at our calendars now and maybe say when we're not available or when we are, and then I can run them by Seth and Jessica and BCTV. Because I know we couldn't
So
do.
we're talking about 6:15 PM meetings on any of the 4 weeknights, right? And then we'll just, can we go through the month and name the ones that don't work? Is that good?
And I know we moved to Wednesdays because Thursdays weren't working, remember?
Yeah.
Right, but now we want to open up, I think, any time that could possibly work, rather than just looking at the Wednesdays, right?
The 18th of June is DRB,
It's what?
is a DRB meeting.
Okay. And you're away that week, right?
And the 19th is a holiday.
Somebody's away
which is
that
why
week.
we didn't do
The
that.
19th is a holiday.
And we know that the select board meets the first and third Tuesdays. So June 3rd and 17th are out.
I mean, we could meet very soon on the stuff that we already have backup for, that we were going to discuss tonight.
Right.
It doesn't have to be out there.
Right, because we have all that backup stuff.
Yeah. We could meet on the 12th.
No, we couldn't do the 12th.
We couldn't
I
do
have
the 12th.
a class on
Oh, they
Tuesday,
have a
Thursday.
class on
Yeah.
That whole week or just that night?
The month. The month.
On Thursdays?
Tuesdays, Thursdays.
Tuesday and Thursday, okay, I'm sorry, didn't understand.
If it truly was in the way, I could.
No, what about the 11th? Next Wednesday?
Thumbs up.
I'm just looking at the town calendars.
I have a meeting at 4, but I could do another meeting.
What about Monday, the 9th?
I have Parks and Rec, but I could miss it.
Who's, Hannah's looking at the town calendar?
Well, yeah, so do you guys don't meet here? Parks
No.
and Rec? There's also an energy committee meeting. I don't know where they meet.
Not in this room.
No.
In planning.
Yeah, Seth said no, not in this room.
We could do the 11th.
I think we have to have options, just because we can do it, might not
Yeah.
mean BCTV can do it.
The 11th or the 9th.
Does that work?
To do the rest of tonight's business?
Yeah.
And then use the
Six, actually,
25th to talk about the thing that's going to come
Thing that's
forward
gonna
about
come
town meeting.
forward.
And
Yeah.
what about potentially the 16th, just in case?
Or 23rd. Those are all Mondays.
Well,
The
maybe-
16th.
Oh, as an alternative, so that we're going to end up with one extra meeting, but it would be the 16th instead of the 9th or the 11th.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think we
I see.
could, like,
I can't do the 16th, I'm having a medical procedure.
all right, so why don't I take this
I
back?
believe I said that on television.
Take this back. I'll take this back, or Seth will help me take this back and see if the select board meetings room is available those 2 days.
On
The 9th and the 11th. But
Of June, 9th and 11th of June.
did we have a reason why the 18th doesn't work?
DRB.
DRB.
Yeah.
Okay. And by then, the following week, we're getting into the 25th.
Yeah.
So.
And then we'll have to confirm with BCTV.
Okay.
But we can figure that out tomorrow. Or we have to figure it out tomorrow. No one cares tonight.
Sorry?
I said no one at BCTV or cares. You care, but.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll try to do it either the 9th or the 11th. Do the rest of the business we have here, and maybe we'll put on the agenda, we'll put, annual town meeting just in case on the agenda if we want to have something, what if something comes up or not?
I think we're begging to have
At
another
first,
excruciating conversation
Yeah,
if
you're
we
right.
try to have one before we're looking at
Yeah.
somebody's
Okay.
idea of what might be the thing.
Yeah, you're right. So, going forward, we'll try to do these other things that we didn't talk about tonight on either the 9th or the 11th. And now, how do we want to leave it right now with who's gonna deal with this, the ideas. Like our draft charter ideas.
If Maya's willing to take the lead, I am willing to be a second to that, to the alternative ideas and do that offline. So that way there is something for us to chew on the 25th.
Okay. I will say that I don't know that I could put it in charter language.
Yeah, how
But
big of
I
an issue do you think that is?
I can,
I don't think we should come with proposed revisions. I think you come with a plan.
That's right.
And then we can
Okay.
decide how to break up revising it once we've developed a plan.
That's exactly right. But so it's like a fresh document where you, in whatever way you think is clearest, tell us what you think would be the right system to replace RTM.
okay.
It's all on you guys. You can do it. Okay. And then we can talk, we'll know then, if we're gonna make the time frame. I truly believe we can make the time frame.
Okay.
I really think we can do it.
You think we can do what?
Make the time frame.
Oh, yeah, I think we can.
I think we can too. Okay, is there anything else that we need to talk about tonight? Do we feel like we know what the next plan is? So tomorrow I'll find out about whether the 9th or the 11th works.
And I'll do a revised agenda for the short meeting, the additional meeting.
Yeah. And, because basically it just has to have the non-citizen voting and it has to have non-citizen voting,
Select board.
select board, town manager, and discuss schedule and work plan moving forward on it.
Yeah.
Just because. I'd like to be able to talk dates if we have to. So basically everything else but number 1.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ambitious. I got it.
It's that. Number 1 is enormously important.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Joy moves to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank
We're
you.
not discussing the rest of your trip.
On
Which is why I came.
Oh, just put that off.
We hope you're available on the 7th or the 9th. And also,
9th or the
in all seriousness, we can
9th
talk between now and then if there's things you want to talk about.
Oh, isn't it the 9th and the 11th?
Yeah,
The 9th or the
And is
11th.
the other one in June, the 25th, is that what you said? That was
25th.
already
Yeah,
sure.
that's a
Yeah.
definite.